Now, in 2003, this game series had its first title that wasn't available on the PC with The Sims Bustin' Out, an interesting attempt to add some spice to the series with free roaming and more choice. However, many people forget that this was also on the Game Boy Advance, and it is freaking sweet.
You're going to hang out with your uncle at his farm in a place called Sim Valley for the summer. This is all explained in a note from Uncle Hayseed where it's hinted that you're from Sim City. It has these goofy cartoony graphics which are surprisingly good at keeping everything clear and distinct, and when you actually talk to Hayseed, you're introduced to the incredible dialogue. The system basically is try and say nice things to get people to like you and try and say mean things to get them to dislike you. You're presented with a random list of things to say for each character, and each character will respond to things differently, which only works because every single character is a stereotype. Like, you'll have to judge how a stereotypical hippie would respond to your love for the environment. It's that sort of thing. Like any Sims game, you have needs that you gotta take care of, so it kind of feels like you're taking care of a Tamagotchi. You never build places like in the main games, but you do fit them out with furniture. There's also minigames which act as the main way of making money because they're framed as jobs. Flipping pizzas, playing guitar at a club, which is a rhythm game, fishing, which is a fishing game. It's all very simple stuff. It kind of reminds me of those old budget Windows CDs that they'd sell at post offices which claimed they had 1,000 games on them. You can get promotions for these jobs by completing them well and upping your skills in the library. A day-night cycle will dictate where the townsfolk will be at different times, and you can ring them up to check where they are, and all the stores, restaurants, and minigames are time sensitive. Bustin' Out GBA does a lot of really cool things. Sometimes the systems just work together for some wonderfully silly moments. Like, at one point I pissed myself in the street, got arrested and put in prison for it, then I couldn't afford my bail so my bed got repossessed, and I had to start sleeping on the hospital emergency room couch. I can't say that anything like that has happened to me in any other game. Sure, they're all goofy stereotypes, but everywhere feels unique and different and quite memorable, and you learn all the opening hours and where people hang out. It has a sort of warm fire feel to it now. I know how to get around, I know where people hang out, I know some of the world's history, and I've made history with some of the people here. It's just a really good vibe. That is if you can somehow ignore how much of a long, tedious grind it is.
Here's another Game Boy Advance game that takes combat racing in a different kind of direction, with Car Battler Joe, which combines combat racing with role-playing game elements. Play as Joe, a 16-year-old kid, and this guy's really into combat racing, or just generally smashing into things. His friends recognize his talent for this unique skill, to the point that Joe even receives a gun vehicle control module for his birthday. Joe is obsessed with combat racing to the point that he wants to find his dad, who apparently ran off to become the biggest, baddest combat racer in all the land or something. The racing and combat takes place from an overhead Mode 7 viewpoint, where you fire at enemies and obstacles using all sorts of weapons, everything from bombs, napalm, lasers, even saw blades. Your car itself can gain special abilities, everything from jumping and speed boosts, and these are cool because they allow you to go back to previous areas and find new stuff, like upgrades for your vehicle, to the point that it allows you, the player, to control the pace to a certain extent, so I appreciate that. I like just about any game that allows you to explore for stuff, find rare items, and then level them up, and I do really like this game's use of the Mode 7 perspective. Once you build up your car to something usable, it's fun to drive around and just blow stuff up. Enemies or obstacles can drop resources after you make them go boom, and you can choose to take back what they drop and use what you find for a variety of different purposes. You can sell it for money, you can deliver it to someone or exchange it for something else, or you can use it to build up your own garage. This gives the game kind of an open-ended feel to it, which is kind of cool. Speaking of open-ended, as far as the story goes, things start out in a linear fashion. You win your first tournament, but pretty much after that you're on your own to really go out and find the story, so to speak. Whether that's doing jobs for people, exploring towns, building your garage, or just, fighting. You also meet characters like Marion, Joe's love interest, and Ken, your racing rival.
There's something about action RPGs that really breaks the boundaries of traditional roleplay gaming. When real-time action takes place of rigid turn-based tactics, a balance has been struck that will satisfy the tastes of many. Games such as these are sometimes heavily delayed for international release, and the Shining Soul series is a prime example. The world of Shining Soul 2 is wide open and fun to explore, and you can't wait to clear one dungeon to get to the next one. Similar to other hack-and-slash action RPGs, like the Seiken Densetsu series, and even compared to Western RPG legend Diablo, you will control your character against hordes of enemies in dungeon after dungeon. This is where the multiplayer factor comes in, and I happen to think that such an attribute is an excellent idea, especially in RPGs. Though it is a hack-and-slash adventure in its true colors, Shining Soul 2 is meant for link cable play, and is much easier and fun to beat with a friend.
Right from the beginning, you can choose between 8 classes, which determines your fighting style. What this essentially means is that the game has the potential for tons of replayability as you try out each class and see which ones click. As an action RPG, Shining Soul 2 is somewhat similar to Secret of Mana in that you need to manage how long an attack takes to charge while dealing with hordes of enemies. So the gameplay consists of going to an area, fighting through hordes of minions, and taking down the boss at the end. Combat is more of a reward for the planning that happens before jumping into the next stage, but you naturally earn levels as you defeat enemies. It is utterly gorgeous on the GBA. I was consistently blown away by the style. The enemy variety was also impressively diverse, rarely relying on simple recolors. It also made me laugh that this golem has this much junk in his trunk.
Asterix Obelix XXL. Not the PS2 or GameCube game, but the stunning third-person platformer for the GBA. This has got to be one of the most technically impressive games ever made. We had no idea this game existed until receiving numerous requests a few months ago, but in all fairness, that's because it was never released in North America, like most Asterix games, it turns out. This game looks and controls remarkably well. If I didn't know this was a GBA game, I'd swear I was looking at some late-era PS1 footage. It's not hard to imagine a Crash Bandicoot port looking this good on the GBA. While the characters are not full 3D models, the sprite work gets the job done, and the world is rendered in 3D with minimal issues. Well, minimal issues that I'm willing to forgive. Standing near a wall sort of breaks the illusion. There's a fair share of platforming, but this is a pretty simple button masher for the most part, tasking you to clobber enemies until a counter ticks down and a door unlocks. Unlike the other two games, there's not much beyond the
Graphically, it manages to not look like complete ass. It's very nice and colourful, and although the player and enemies are just 2D sprites, they are well animated and do the job well enough. It may be simplistic, but that doesn't mean it can't be fun. There's a decent amount of collectibles to get, and to the game's credit, it does get more complex as it goes on, adding combos to the combat system and items such as torches for the player to use. I would definitely recommend playing this game if you can. Like I said, a game being simple doesn't stop it from being fun, and couple that with the novelty of playing a 3D platformer on a GBA, then you get a pretty enjoyable experience, albeit one that is only really remarkable due to the console it was released on.
Rebellion would follow it up in September with a port of Rockstar's Smugglers Run, which animates this voxel world effortlessly. Granted, the voxels themselves, being the cubes this world is made up of, are pretty large, meaning they're easier to work with from a technical perspective, and the draw distance is quite low, particularly when compared to later voxel-based games, but considering how early this came out, it is a real achievement.
Simpsons Road Rage. We got one. We got one! If you didn't know, Simpsons Road Rage is a Crazy Taxi clone released in 2001 for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Nintendo GameCube that was so shameless, Sega took EA to court for patent infringement. The suit was settled out of court, and the GBA game was released 2 years later in 2003 with THQ Publishing instead of EA. And what we got could only be described as Mode 7 graphics pushed to absolute insanity. It's so beautiful, I can't look away. The way the world bends and dips, it feels unnatural. I've never seen anything like it. And maybe that's for good reason? Simpsons Road Rage for the GBA spits in the eye of tradition, blazing its own path with one of the most insane looking games I've ever seen. And not only does it look insane, some of these maps are gigantic. But enough about the visuals. Simpsons Road Rage also plays pretty damn well and has a ridiculous amount of content. Controls are great, frame rate is smooth, the actual car models are impressively detailed, and there's even models for your passengers. Like any good Simpsons game, it's loaded with characters, references, and familiar locales. Plus, 5 modes of play, 6 cities, 15 drivers, and 10 missions with some wonderfully bizarre objectives. Yep, I am Krusty the Clown, driving and balancing on a ball. What even is this game? Plus a bunch of unlockable stuff like the ability to customize every color of a character, including the driver.
A very unknown company called Sonari Interactive ported Driver 2 down using a BSP engine, which might not look like much, but it was a technical achievement with its massive open world cities where you could both drive and walk around on foot, its good physics system, and its good police AI. Like, it's surprising how well this captures the essence of Driver 2.
Featuring 2 large cities with heaps of different cars, this game blew my little mind back in the day. The driving physics are also much closer to the full game, which is a nice touch. Though it's not the best looking game and it doesn't really compare to Driver 3, it's still a remarkable achievement from much earlier on in the Game Boy Advance's life cycle.
In the same vein as GTA, there was a fan-made GTA clone called Payback, originally made for the Amiga back in 2001, which is an unusual time for an Amiga game to come out, and I don't like using the term GTA clone, but this was, with all respects, initially made as basically GTA on the Amiga. In 2003, it was ported to Mac, and in late 2004, it found itself as an official release on the Game Boy Advance, where it was apparently finished quite a bit earlier, but the dev couldn't get a publisher until Destination Software picked it up. Regardless, Payback is one of the most technically complex games on the system, where, unlike GTA, almost everything here is polygonally 3D, from the pedestrians to the cars to the buildings, and it's almost all textured. On top of that, it's filled with impressive visual effects like car shadows, human shadows, skid marks from tires, smoke from damaged cars, and particle effects which are shown off with some very silly bullet and blood decals. It even sports some fairly realistic car crash physics to top it all off. It's not as enjoyable of a game as GTA, partly because it lacks character, but it's certainly more flashy, and it has more bells and whistles than any other game we've looked at or will look at.
It's more than just a third-rate Grand Theft Auto clone. It is, in fact, a third-rate Grand Theft Auto clone set in a bizarre version of America conceived of by someone whose only experience of America comes from movies and the news, where flash white and blue cop cars drive on the left side of the road and mafia types tell you to get your bloody arse in gear. There are 3 main cities in the single-player mode, each with 2 sets of missions to complete. It's very much a British take on American crime, which includes the sort of missions that don't really make much sense if you think about them for more than 7 seconds. One mission has your mob boss sending you out to kill the attendees of a Ku Klux Klan rally for no reason other than he thinks they're racist bastards. But that's not what's impressive about this game. No, the impressive thing, and you might have noticed it already, is that this is a Game Boy Advance game rendered entirely in 3D. Everything in this game is being rendered in real time. It's not perfect, there's texture tearing and significant slowdown during events such as explosions, but it's pretty bloody impressive. The fact that Apex Designs managed to get the thing to do this is nothing short of astounding.
Well, despite being 3 years into the GBA and experimenting with their Smugglers Run and Midnight Club franchises, Rockstar stuck to its top-down classic-style guns, though to be fair, delivering the best GTA yet on a handheld. GTA Advance opted for 2D-style gameplay but has some great 3D graphics. Check out those buildings.
Now, Grand Theft Auto Advance looks very similar to Grand Theft Auto 2 on the PC, but the funny thing is, the actual vehicles in this game are not just 2D sprites like in Grand Theft Auto 2. In this game, they seem to have a little bit of weight and momentum to them.
On-foot movement and combat is really good. Strafing with guns is easy and feels great. You can leap over cars, so maneuvering around traffic isn't a problem. Cars can flip over where they magically catch fire and explode like in modern GTA games. And you know what? That's the thing. In many ways, GTA Advance is a stopgap between GTA 2 and GTA 3. It's the classic style but informed by the modern games, and it's not bad. Hot off the heels of their jaw-dropping Asterix Obelix XXL came the GBA port of Driver 3, which has got to be one of the most technically impressive games ever made. An enormous improvement over the already impressive Driver 2 Advance, Driver 3 speaks for itself.
Just look at it. These 3D graphics are incredible. With 2 massive free roam cities with what the back of the box claims to be over 30 miles of road each, and gameplay which seamlessly switches between driving and third-person shooting, Driver 3 on the GBA, like its console counterpart, is also a super ambitious game. It's not a controversial statement to say that this might be the most ambitious game on the system. It's developed by the French studio VD Dev, known at the time as Velez and Jubail Dev, who have been known for pushing graphical boundaries on Nintendo handhelds since the Game Boy and Game Boy Color.
Look at that running animation, how fast you cruise in cars, the color and variety of buildings and sidewalks, how populated the streets are, how the roads curve and slope, how I hit that light pole and instantly failed that mission, damn it! For this mission, I have to follow that cop car for 1.5 minutes, and if it ever gets outside of the stunted draw distance, bam, instant mission failure. Follow the target missions are always the worst part of sandbox games, but this is the second mission in the game, and no, you green bastard, get out of my way, damn it! This incredible game is severely marred by missions like this, but the point is to show you just how sprawling and detailed the city is. Once you complete it, and you have my prayers, the game opens up to you. Story and side missions appear on the map. There's also a bunch of hidden package collectibles to find. Plenty to do.
It's on record that they wanted to make this game as close to the console version as possible. Because of this, the game looks remarkably similar to the main game, and if you know Driver 3 well, you've probably already recognized a lot of this. Here's a side-by-side of Miami's maps, with the GBA one on the left. Please excuse the markings all over these, I could only find maps that were guides for one thing or another. Everything is scaled down for the GBA, but it's all still here. Let's look at Nice. Again, the maps are very similar. Like knowing what the GBA can do, what it's capable of, what the specs are, this version of Driver 3 is simply amazing.